I think there's still a certain question, and in fact here in Singapore, the BCA is still working on addressing how do we specifically value green buildings in the traditional surveying sense. But if we look beyond that and look at just what value do we get from green buildings, then there are many, many aspects which we can look to. Those can be at the individual level as occupants or people that live in green buildings. Those can be due to the health aspects of the buildings or the comfort and the productivity that we work in. There have been various research studies done, and CBRE has undertaken a few in different markets around the world that would suggest that in some of those markets we can assign definitely a positive valuation impact to a building because it's green. But equally, we've seen that in other markets it's very hard to do that using traditional valuation methods. Those methods incorporate different aspects of the economy of a building, and that can include the rental of leased space, of leased buildings. So if the rental goes up, of course, then the valuation of the building will go up. And with green buildings, we would, of course, particularly look to see the operational cost of a building go down as we look to achieve efficiency, particularly around energy. So in those sorts of cases, it's relatively straightforward to understand how being green helps to improve the operational efficiency and lower the operational costs of a building. The key word there is performance. So really, traditionally green building has always been about new construction and design, and a lot of the things that have been evaluated as being green have been modeled or theoretical. I think the other interesting area where there's much more increase in focus is not necessarily new, but the focus and the parameters that are being evaluated is around the performance for the building occupants. So we're seeing attention to the concept of wellness, which is an extrapolation of indoor environmental quality that's been a pillar of green building since day one, but just looking at many more parameters around that field. And of course there's the WELL certification scheme, which is a brand new certification scheme just addressing wellness as a concept that dovetails with other green building rating systems. Singapore is probably the best example in the region. The key really behind that success here has been having a strong government understanding of the need and the benefits, having a strong master plan, a robust green building rating system, and then importantly is following that up and supporting that with smart, intelligent regulation and funding. And that's exactly what the Singapore government has done, and the success of that is being seen today. And so I think really the key is for any market is to have a visionary government backing behind moving an industry towards being green. Other mechanisms would include, I think, sharing knowledge. Usually, as building occupiers, we tend to take buildings for granted. We don't have a lot of insight into how they work, how we use the building space itself impacts the way the building works and how it performs. Being able to share more knowledge about that, helping inform occupants how they impact the building, how decisions they make can improve the performance of the building, and that can help them in a feedback loop, we're starting to understand the implications of that, and they're quite profound. So we're starting to see in newer versions of green building systems areas where that's addressed, and looking at improving the communication and the raising of the awareness and the collaboration between landlords and tenants. That leads us into the area of green leases. In terms of challenges, I think the biggest one still remains the scale of transformation, which even in leading markets, if we look at the challenges that scientists tell us we face and the time scale that they tell us that we need to address them in, then the scale of transformation that is happening, or the rate of that scale, the rate of that transformation, clearly just isn't there yet. So the challenge is scaling that up. And again, I think the solution to that challenge has to be a strong government direction. And we can, again, look to Singapore, where you have a strong vision with a clear deadline a mandate that will be achieved by that deadline. And then, iterations of master planning, looking at the various issues that are going to help the country get to that point, and then addressing those through those iterations of master plans with the regulations that will support those, providing the market with instruments to help move the industry forward. Well, I think we'll continue to see an increase in the adoption of green building certification. That trend is moving forward. What will be interesting, I think, will be the mix of systems that will be adopted. We're seeing more and more systems come to market, so it'll be interesting to see if and how that continues. We'll definitely see an increase in the adoption of green lease clauses, or green clauses in leases, not least because some of those do not have to be at all onerous on either the landlord or the tenant, and they make very good sense for both parties. So I think responsible property investment is going to continue to grow as a trend, and will have, I think, some quite profound effects across the region in terms of how properties are built, and in particular how properties are renovated and how they're managed in an ongoing fashion. So I think that's another big trend to look for.